Coming up today on Locked On at Texas Tech, what is up next for Grant McCasland and the Red Raider men's basketball team? The road. Preparing for that departure and getting into another few departures for Joey McGuire and the Red Raider football program next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Today's episode brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com and use our code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you on a holiday edition for some. Shout out to those still on the clock on this Monday as we kick off a new week and a different week for Grant McCasland and the Red Raiders. Got a couple of football topics to hit before we are out of here, including something from Saturday, which was maybe serving as a bit of a freak preview at halftime of the men's basketball game. You saw some high-flying Red Raider football players that we want to touch on and talk about some of that outright athleticism and natural ability that obviously is being brought to West Texas by Joey McGuire and company. And we'll also get to a couple of departures from the football program via entries to the transfer portal coming up as well. But as we look ahead to a week that I mentioned is going to be different, I mean that because Texas Tech is headed away from United Supermarkets Arena, and we can essentially, Chris, kick off a Big 12 weekend in review via the next opponent for Texas Tech. And I'm pretty ticked off at Texas Christian for doing what they did over the weekend as Houston takes another L. We go into the weekend, and this is what's coming up for the Red Raiders next on the road from the dirtiest of the dirty third. And we talked last week like, hey, you know, Houston probably has had their attention gotten by their head coach. They're going to Fort Worth. This was one of the other spicy games in the Big 12 Conference over the weekend. Well, the attention apparently not gotten enough because the Horned Frogs take the win 68-67. So I guess we say again, this time with Texas Tech coming up next, I guess they'll have their attention gotten by their head coach. I don't know if it's a top 5 team that you want to be heading into facing, taking another loss, but that's what the Red Raiders have, man. What'd you make of that result among some others that we'll get here to here today as the Horned Frogs top the Cougars?
Yeah, you know, because everybody is starting to look at resumes and kind of how now that these teams are starting to play each other and beat up on each other and kind of how it all sorts itself out with the data out there. You know, like from a Texas Tech perspective, because this has a direct correlation to the University of Houston, who you're talking about here. By the way, you know, tell you how mad they are. They put a hole in the hallway, I think, of the locker room, you know, there at Schollmeyer Arena. So yeah, I think frustration literally starting to show there for the Cougs. But you know, like your RPI, or excuse me, your net ranking, it was at 30 prior to beating Kansas State. It drops to 37 just because of how they factored in. And it's worth mentioning, you know, your biggest resume win on your resume is the win in Austin, and Texas loses to West Virginia over the weekend, and they go from 44 to I think 59 in the net ranking. So, but that's your only quad 1 win to this point. But, you know, and I just think that's, you know, and I think you've got, you know, your Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Michigan, Northern Iowa wins are kind of the quad 2, quad 3 kind of component there that are helping you. But as you turn to the University of Houston, even after their 0-2 week, I believe they're still number 1 in the net rankings because of their wins, their non-conference schedule, all the above, and the different data that factors it in. Because, you know, you lost at you know, TCU, which TCU is pretty high up there, but you know, and obviously Iowa State, you know, they rank up fairly high in the mid 20s or 30 range or whatever. And so those are 2 road. And again, you don't just get punted. So what's fascinating about it is Texas Tech, even if you lose on Wednesday, your rankings, your net is going to go up. It just, regardless of result, because of how good. And guess what BYU is right now? BYU is your Saturday opponent at home. They are 4th in the net ranking right now. So this is like, as far as the on paper part of your week coming up, it's wild. But anyway, that just kind of give you a synopsis of where Texas Tech is with all this stuff. But
are you telling us to throw the net ranking out the window? Is what it sounds like.
Well, no, I'm telling you, pay attention, and that every game matters. In that this is a week where you could make a ton of hay.
Yes.
You could make a ton of hay. And I think that as you look at it, if you can figure out a way to at least win one of those, and I'm not trying to lower or raise expectations, because you win both of them, great. Hell yeah.
We're down.
But if you could figure out a way just to split at the very minimum, you've made some serious hay. If you win both of them, yeah, you're not, your ranking's not dropping anymore after. It's on the way up, man. But West Virginia beating Texas, TCU beating, I think what is a really good Houston team. But again, it's like the welcome to the Big 12 jokes are out there. And Kelvin Sampson, he's been in this league before. He understands. This is a different animal than what they've been operating in. This is going to benefit them, if anything. And I would say this, as you anticipate your matchup with Houston, I'll probably say this the day of that game as well, but this is either going to be the best time to play these guys. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, if they just are missing something and kind of doubting each other, or they're just kind of in a funk, every team's going to go through this to where it's just like, we just don't think we're ever going to win another game again. Everybody has these portions of your season. Or it's going to end up being the worst time to play them. It's just going to be one or the other. I'm not sure which. I guess we'll find out. But, yeah, you have to anticipate that you're going to get their very best, and they want to get this nasty feeling, the nasty taste out of their mouth and all that stuff, because after and they'll be back at home. Ticket prices for the Fertitta Center, I think I've seen people speculating, they're like $600 or $700 to this game if you're trying to buy, seats and all that stuff. So, which is wild to me. But the Cincinnati game in Waco on Saturday night, Cincinnati looks pretty good. That's a really good Baylor team, and Cincinnati was not going away, and they had a chance at the end, to win it or to take the lead.
Yep. And
just couldn't hit the shot. But that's a sold out crowd at the Foster Pavilion, and so this league is just it's probably very stressful for coaches. I get it, but for those of us that are observers of it, it's really fun because in any road win you get, you just like get on the bus and get me out of here before somebody takes it away from me. But this is why you hold. If you got to try to hold serve at home. And that's what we're talking about. Baylor wins at home. TCU wins at home. Kansas won at home. West Virginia won at home. Iowa State won at home. Texas Tech won at home. I think I may be forgetting one of those games there that took place. But, and Central Florida was the one that dropped their home game to the aforementioned BYU team.
Yep.
Yeah, big emotional win, and then hey man, you guys are so good. This is awesome, and then you get right back, and they pull the rug out 3 or 4 days later.
Well, depending on when you're listening to this, if it's Monday morning, we'll have some rankings to digest a little bit later on in the day. But I'm just trying to do some math and follow a precedent. You lose by 11 at home, top 25 still. You only lose by 3 on the road. I'm assuming the Longhorns still going to be a top 25 team whenever it comes out, right? But yeah, the Houston loss, I think, just as a fan of Texas Tech, having to go face them next, I'm not thrilled with, but it wasn't like some great shocker. Texas Christian's a good basketball team, man. Yeah. And on their floor, I don't know that they've gotten their just due as far as a ranking or national attention just yet. But you and I have talked a little bit about the Horned Frogs the last couple of weeks, whether it was that Kansas game in Lawrence or now what we saw them do against the Cougars. That's a good basketball team. So no shame necessarily in that game, although the jokes are ripe for the picking, and you might as well pick while they're ripe. So we're going to do some of that. But the Baylor-Cincinnati one, man, that was really interesting to me because we were talking just a week ago, like, okay, well, what's Cincinnati going to be in the league? Because I feel like they hadn't got as much conversation, certainly not as much as like Houston or then the start BYU got off to among those new additions. But Cincinnati making a little noise, misses a potential game-winning three-pointer, as Chris alludes to there. But no question that the Red Raiders, with 3 of their next 4 coming away from United Supermarkets Arena, going to have to rely on some of that toughness. Now, we are talking about some of those here in the great state, whether it's Houston or Fort Worth. I don't know what their ticket tricks and tactics are going to be like necessarily in either one, but I'm hoping that you'll be joined by a few Red Raiders in those locales as well. So maybe some red and black juice in those buildings.
Certainly, you're going to need it. But TCU, their length and athleticism is going to be a problem. They've arguably had one of the most impressive weeks of anybody in the league, even though they're not undefeated, because we know what happened to them at the end of but I mean, think about it. They've played, take out Baylor, but as far as rankings go, their 3 first games in Lawrence and then home against, I think, the 12th ranked Sooners, and then what was the second or first ranked Houston Cougars. And they are one bad call away potentially from being 3-0. So that gives you an idea. And I said this on the show before, but I used to not really give any credence to TCU and Jamie Dixon because I just thought they underachieved. I heard this. They have 36 wins in their program history over ranked teams. 36. I think Jamie Dixon is responsible for 21 of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a stat.
Yeah. And they're just one of many teams that are just going to be a pain to deal with on a night in, night out basis. And it's just why you got to show up and play well, and that's why for Texas Tech, I'm glad that there's maybe a different path to victory now than what we had seen before, and that you can roll your sleeves up and get in a fist fight and then live to tell about it. So,
and we're okay, by the way, with them shooting very well and also winning that way, right? Doesn't always have to be
1,000%. But as we've seen, there's going to be nights where they just don't go in.
Yes.
I thought you got pretty good looks against Kansas State, and they just wasn't to be, and it's just one of those things where we had not seen you win one of your tougher games when that wasn't part of it, and now we have, and so you got to file that one away and pull that recipe out of grandma's recipe box for those that really good cornbread that you always like on a cold day, and say maybe we need to let's bake some of that stuff up because you're going to need it again. Bottom line, cornbread's good all the time anyway. So
what's the note card say? Cornbread and defense wins championships. I mean, that's seriously why you want to root a program or a culture in the defensive end of the floor, regardless of the sport. The passes are not always going to be caught. The shots are not always going to drop, but defense will travel. And it seems like Grant McCaslin and company have defense and will travel, to borrow a phrase. As I mentioned, a pass being caught. Let's go back to United Supermarkets Arena, but on a different front. First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. And football is close to wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with America's #1 sports book and the official sports book of Locked On. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place only a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. So many ways to spice up the action with FanDuel's safe, secure, and easy-to-use app. Are you really even parlaying if you're not visiting FanDuel's Parlay Hub? I doubt it. So get to FanDuel.com/lockedon today. And if you're a new customer, take advantage of $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place only a $5 bet with FanDuel at FanDuel.com/lockedon, official partner of the NFL. Let's go back to United Supermarkets Arena, but on a different front. Football, basketball, mashup. And if you're in the building, you got to see a Red Raider football slam dunk contest. If you weren't, you may have seen some of the highlight videos by now, which, by the way, I guess there's a baseball shortstop component somewhere in this as well. But it got me to thinking, Chris, and it wasn't like it was the entire roster available. But, we had a conversation about a year ago prior to the Red Raider football season, not quite that long ago, but Red Raider football season being kicked off. a freak preview. Some of this natural ability, Red Raider speed and violence, we hear about all the time, and how they're looking often for some of those guys who are multi-sport athletes in high school and have the ability to do some different things that just can't really be taught. And I was curious what you thought about some of what you saw there at the halftime break. I don't know if you got to take it all in, but we got to actually see some new names in the mix. I think, what was it, Trey Jackson, who's been here for half an hour or something on campus. Then all of a sudden he's jumping over a starting quarterback, starting running back. And of course, Will Burns. I mean, it was pretty wild to see some of that athleticism on display. Certainly enjoyable and brought a little more electricity to the building.
Yeah, you had 5 players participate. I think what is fascinating, speaking to like the freak aspect of this thing, is that 2 of those 5 are tight ends for you.
Yeah, Conyers. I forgot to mention him.
I mean, that's 6'4", 270.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is why I'm telling you, man, there's some NFL measurables here just because he's just a really good athlete. I mean, we had talked about when he committed and what a big deal it was, and that, Arizona State put him in the Wildcat and was letting him run a lot of the quarterback stuff. And he's running it for 10, 15, 25 yards at times, on some of these things as the quarterback in the Wildcat formation. But yeah, whenever they were like, Jalen Conyers is going to be part of this, I'm like, okay, this is wild. But it speaks to his athleticism. Trey Jackson, one of your tight end signees. But Jamori Davis was also an addition. He redshirts last year. I think they haven't ultimately decided whether he's going to be slot receiver, maybe DB. But yeah, check the box on the freak athlete part of it. He was a really good basketball player, just multi-sport athlete there in Clarendon. He redshirted last year, and then the 2 that kind of, I think, in a way stole the show. But yeah, Will Burns is fourth string quarterback type guy out of California, but he's really where Tech fans are going to know him is that he's a stud baseball player for you, a starter for Tim Tadlock, and he's flipping it up back behind him and catching it and doing some different things. Just a really, really good athlete, which is why, he's on the, he's doing the dunk thing on the basketball court, but he's also, on the football team and also a stud on the diamond. But his bread's going to be buttered on the diamond. Make no mistake. He's not, I don't think he'll ever play football for you. And obviously he's not going to help out Coach McCaslin, but like the guy that I'm going to spend more time talking about here, speaking of freaks, and I don't know if he ultimately won it or if they gave it to Will Burns, but like if you just look at and watch Marcus Ramon Edwards, I'm going to start talking about him a bit like I used to talk about like Isaac Smith. And granted, Isaac Smith has done a few things and we've seen it. We haven't really seen Marcus Ramon Edwards yet, but you just talk about freakish athleticism, raw, mind you, on the football field, but freakish athleticism because he's up to a little over 220 now. And if you just looked at him, you're like, okay, if I go into the if I want to create like on a video game, what like an edge or hybrid type player in today's 2024 version of college football, I mean, it's going to come out kind of looking like Marcus Ramon Edwards. The 6'3", 6'4", 220, just quick, athletic, can jump, can do all the things. And it's really fun to think about the possibilities there. And he's got 4 years left to roll. You haven't begun to scratch the surface with this kid yet. And he's out there just hammering down the ball, like power dunks, jumping up high, over, through people, whatever. I was like, oh, inject this straight into my veins, man. Yeah, he's somebody that I think, I don't know how quickly it'll happen, but when Bruce Feldman does that freaks list at some point, he's going to put Marcus Ramon Edwards' name on it at some point.
Really?
There's some off the radar guys that get added to this list, even if they haven't produced a ton on the football field. I don't know if we're going to get that this offseason or not, but eventually he's a guy that you list there in those 100 players from around the country for what they either do in the weight room or how high they jump or something that puts them in the freak category, because he checks a lot of boxes there, man.
I am this may be just lost on a lot of people, but one of the things I enjoyed most from my very elementary playing days or time spent as a part of a team, I am a sucker for celebrating a teammate's accomplishments. I love to see guys celebrate others. And one of the things I enjoyed the most in going back and looking at some of the photos or some of the highlight videos was the look on the teammates' faces behind whoever was dunking at that particular time. You know, Caleb Rogers and the MC and just all. I love that stuff. I love seeing those teammates have fun celebrating their other teammates. And you have given me so many segue opportunities to get to the final portion of this conversation, because we're going to touch on a guy who was on a previous freak list, but also maybe mentioning Isaac Smith, who is a guy that you're going to be turning to as a result of one of these portal entries. First, today's episode brought to you by Jase Medical, and I hope this podcast is a great escape from the nutso realities of life, but just because it is an escape doesn't mean those realities have gone away. And one of the latest pieces of wildness I've heard, according to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics right in the middle of flu season. Can you imagine how helpless you'd feel if your spouse or kids were sick while a supply chain issue kept them from the medication they needed? You don't have to, because of the peace of mind you're going to get with Jase Medical and the Jase Case. The Jase Case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics that treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including respiratory infections, sinus issues, dermatological infections, and many more. These things can affect anybody, so be one of those anybodies that goes to jasemedical.com right now to receive your 12-month supply of your daily medication. And remember to use our promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. At jasemedical.com, you're going to complete a physician assessment that will then be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. Never been more important to be prepared, so take the quick step to do so for your family and go to jasemedical.com and use our promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase with Jase Medical. Now, a couple to touch on, but the headline here, as far as the conversation goes, is Steve Linton, who has now entered the transfer portal and will be seeking his football fortune elsewhere. This one was kind of up in the air, I guess. I don't know. I didn't have a good feel for whether or not I expected it to continue here in Lubbock or if he was going to be an entry. But as this has now come to pass, Chris, how did it strike you? Was it something that was kind of a foregone conclusion for a period of time? Was it surprising at all? What do you think?
Yeah, so I guess in the last week we've seen Blake Burris, Matt Keeler, and now Steve Linton enter the portal. Linton is the headliner, as you mentioned. The thing that I guess is, I don't. Did I like seeing this news? No, I didn't. Is it a major loss? I don't know if we know that yet. Would I have preferred to keep him? Yeah. But I guess the most frustrating part of it was the timing here, in that, boy, if he was going to do this, you would have loved to have had it happen, when everybody else was kind of rolling through, just so you would have had a chance to maybe replace him. You'll get a chance to do that in the portal if you so choose in the spring period. And I think, and so what have you lost here? I think that's a conversation. He played in 8 games. I think that he was kind of a microcosm of what your team was this past year, in that it was, I don't know if the right word is unrealized potential. He battled through an ankle injury most of the season. I don't think a lot of people knew. I think he had someone pass away very, very close to him that I think got him in a bit of a funk, and then he was dealing with the injury issue, and then with the ankle, and then it comes the back issue, and so he just had a lot going on, health wise and all that. I mean, I could see exactly what they thought they had at times. You just didn't see it enough, but rarely did we get a glimpse of him healthy, and I think not that. Maybe there were some reasons for this, but I mean, the one game where he just shined was in Waco. I mean, he had the 3 sacks. He was all over the place. Now, Baylor's offensive line was a bit of a sieve this year, and a lot of guys got to eat, that night. But that was really where he kind of shined and helped you win that game, helped put Baylor away, just was everywhere. Couldn't be blocked. And, Duda Banks was a part of that as well and all that. But unrealized potential, and I just wish you would have maybe had more time on your side to ably replace him if you so chose, like I said. But here's the thing about that particular spot, and you mentioned Isaac Smith. I want more assets, I guess, there at that spot rather than fewer. But,
Yeah.
This is going to be a young and inexperienced group for the most part. However, on paper, very talented and somewhat deep. I mean, a data ray, Dylan Spencer. I mean, these are 4-star recruits here. Isaac Smith. People should know about watching this show what our thoughts were when he got hurt back in August and was lost for the year. I was just personally like crushed because he really came on at the tail end of last year. He's just a great kid. He's gotten so much bigger. You have Amir Washington, who had 3 sacks in your bowl game. They've kind of moved him to one of those edge guys. Bryce Ramirez, who can do a little bit of everything. You want to play him an inside linebacker, you want to play him on the edge. He's very versatile, but he has done some of the edge stuff as well. And you've got Harvey Dyson and Charles Esters. You've got 3 guys that you signed as part of your recruiting class. So as far as the body in general, you're not hurting for capable bodies. You're just hurting for like a bona fide dude and experience, because this is going to be largely a very talented, a lot of potential here, just not a lot of, okay, they haven't done it though yet, going with it, and you hope to see that. But I bet if you go through spring, they'll kind of monitor it. Do we need to add anybody? Do we like what we've got? Is there anybody out there that's going to, elevate or be an upgrade over what we've got? There's probably a lot of different dynamics in bringing somebody in, but you will have that option available to you if you want to pursue it. But that's kind of the conversation about Steve Linton. So in so many ways.
And you're talking about him individually and kind of comparing it to the team overall. It was okay, but not dynamic. The big plays weren't there as often as you'd like to see them. Okay, you wind up with a winning record, 1 game over 500, bowl win, all that stuff. But where was the dynamic stuff? And that's what you're wanting to see more from, especially at that position. I don't think like every position has to be, big play capable. I love to see a left guard put a guy on his butt, but if he just gets him out of the way, that's just as serviceable as well. But if you're talking about a guy off the edge, you're wanting some dynamic stuff there. And I know we were recently spoiled with the guy that's playing for the Las Vegas Raiders right now, but that's kind of how I would remember him. Okay, but didn't quite get some of those highs that you would have liked to have seen consistently. Keeler or Burris, I think RedRaidersports.com had a report on Keeler a while ago that this was going to be the destination for him. And then there was some thought from the program, like he's not there yet. So I don't know if that was a foregone conclusion as well, but what do you make of the other 2 names there?
Yeah, Blake Burris he just was somebody that, I would have liked to have kept him too. Now he's a walk-on and he converted offensive lineman, but he was active and a pretty good athlete, but he's got a degree already, so he can enter the portal after the period's even over and just kind of go late. That's as we learn all these rules and everything, I guess when you're a graduate, you can kind of get in whenever you want and move around, and with really zero restrictions. I would have liked to have kept him. I think Matt Keeler, again, great kid, loved it here, big-time Red Raider. He stayed through the bowl game. I don't know if he was just wanting to see kind of how things played out, who they brought in, but I think wants to play. And, selfishly, you want to keep him from a depth standpoint, but that opens up, like I said, now you have kind of a couple of scholarships, I guess, opened up here that, again, if you want to fill, you can. Whether that, you gives you more of a high school perspective and you want to add more to your recruiting class from a high school standpoint, or if you want to, add via the portal, I guess you'll just kind of go through spring and kind of see what that looks like. But and like back to because the real player that you've lost is Linton, because he would have been a starter for you next year. I think Matt Keeler would have been a depth piece. Blake Burris would have been a depth piece. And those guys theoretically may have not really played much, if any at all. But Linton would have started for you, in my opinion, had he been healthy and all those things, and allowed another year of development, or just being it allowed you to have more of a rotation of guys. But now everybody moves up a notch. Because I think in Tim DeRuyter's defense, Cowan, it's built really to showcase those edge guys. That those guys are the ones that have to make plays. It's really set up for those guys to be a big part of it, and it's needed. And you're right, you didn't really have that. A couple of forced fumbles, had the 3 sacks, 4.5 tackles for loss, 23 tackles total for Steve Linton, but and Miles Cole is kind of in that same boat, I think, as far as maybe just not enough on paper as far as game-changing plays, whether it be sacks or forced fumbles or QB hurries or whatever. But that's what you hope, that whatever you put in your rotation next year, there's a bit more of that, because that's kind of the way this scheme is set up. And you look at lack of takeaways and turnovers forced and all those things, which we had harped on a lot this year. I mean, there's a direct correlation into Miles Cole and Steve Linton not producing as much as you would have hoped, and that overall number being just way down, So it needs to be better.
Had this problem on both sides of the football, and you've tried to address it. You want to be more big play capable offensively, defensively. Really, the big play capabilities seem to come more so in the special teams game this previous season than anywhere else. And I don't know if that's something we anticipated, but would love to see that stick around next year. All right, stick with us this week because we got a wild one coming up. We'll get back to hoops. And, of course, as we get nearer to tip-off, setting the table for a big one from Houston as Tech hits the road for 3 of their next 4. But up next, it's the Houston Cougars, fitting the description of the next potential victim. The pride and joy of the American Athletic Conference, or wherever the hell they came from. Once upon a time, Southwest Conference colleague of the Red Raiders, though. So back to cooking some of those old-time fires, and we'll get you ready for that one as we get closer to Hump Day. Chris, appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoy the rest of your holiday. If you're getting some of that, you're putting in work right now, but maybe staying bundled up and staying warm like we wish for the rest of our audience all across West Texas or wherever you may be here today, man. We'll see you on the other side for the next edition.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it, Cowan. Enjoy being with you. Hope everybody enjoys the rest of their Monday, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. For Chris, I'm Casey, and we hope to see you back here for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.